Uh, Hi everyone. I take pleasure in welcoming you all to our first webinar in the year 2020, and we are starting with a very important topic, psychological safety. Okay, so I would like to introduce the facilitators for the day. Uh, I'm Sneha and Shraddha is a co-facilitator, so we are both going to co-facilitate this webinar. We are both managing delivery and operations team at Strengthscape. Before going into the webinar, I'll just give a brief introduction about Strengthscape. So we are an organization development and transformation company headquartered in Bangalore. So we offer about 9 different services, uh, majorly like behavioral training. We offer behavioral training at all the 3 levels, which would be for managers, leaders, and individual contributors. We offer different HR certifications. We also have competency mapping, digital learning, executive coaching, image consulting. We also have OD consulting. Psychometric assessments is one of our big 50. And also we do technical training. Okay, so these are the webinar objectives. So we'll be looking at what psychological safety is and also compare between different topics that are quite related to psychological safety, but understand it in clear concepts, and also relate between the connection between fear and psychological safety, and also look at different measurement techniques that are helpful in understanding what is the level of psychological safety of any individual or the team, and also look at what are the ways that one can create a psychologically safe environment in their workplace. Before understanding about psychological safety in detail, I would like to start with understanding what are the keys to a successful team. There are 5 keys that enable a team to be more successful and productive. So first one is about psychological safety. So this is basically an individual's feeling of being safe and the ability to be oneself and voice out in any given situation. The second one is dependability. This basically means where there is reliability and collaboration within the team to get the work done with quality and at the same time meeting the deadlines. And the next one is about structure and clarity. So here, another successful factor for a team to be effective is to understand what the job is, what are the job expectations, and what is expected out of them. This is another important factor. The next one is finding meaning and sense of purpose in the work that they do. So this is also a factor that has an impact on the team's effectiveness. The final factor is called impact. So this is because to see where the work they do has an impact. What is the kind of result that the work they do has enables the team and the team members to understand the importance of their team and perform better. So having said this, now I'll show a question, and so this is the question. Among these factors, what do you think are most essential for a successful team? I request all of you to put your answers in the chat box. So I'll repeat the question again. Amongst these, which one of the factor do you think is most essential for a successful team? Okay, I could see some responses in the chat box. Okay, great. I see a lot of responses coming in the chat box. So there was a study that was done by Google called the Google's Project Aristotle. They tried to understand what are the keys for a successful team. So the meaning or the aim of the study was to know how can we build a team that can be more effective and perform better than the other teams. And they conducted extensive research, collected data from several people, and the result that they found was amongst all these 5 factors, psychological safety was on the top. And then came the dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. These were the order of importance that the research found. So that was the research that suggested that how important psychological safety is for a high performing team. So let me move ahead to maybe define what is psychological safety. So psychological safety is basically a belief that the context is safe for interpersonal risk taking, and so no one will be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So basically, what this means is environment where there is no fear is one part of it, and the second part is also about when someone voices out, there is no consequences that they'll face because of voicing out or being different. That's the whole concept of psychological safety. Now, once we move into let's move and understand about importance of psychological safety. Why psychological safety is important? What are the areas that it might have an impact in an organization setup? So first point is about it matters for performance. Uh, so let's before seeing why psychological safety matters for performance, let's take a step back and consider the work scenarios and the nature of work that is today. So, in today's scenario, a lot of work is more evolving. It requires a lot of judgment, it requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication. So, for that purpose, uh, for someone to be effective, they also need to voice out a lot, communicate a lot. Communicate freely without having any inhibitions or apprehensions, there needs to be a psychologically safe environment. That's when people will voice out, and with the nature of the work that is in today's scenario, it is essential for anyone to voice up. That's why psychological safety has an impact on the performance. And this has also been proved by a lot of studies that were conducted. Moving ahead, psychologically safe employees are also engaged employees. So, in the recent times, a lot of focus is given on employee engagement rather than employee satisfaction. So, what's the difference between satisfaction and engagement? Is one basic thing. Satisfaction is about keeping the employees happy. But once that waves off or something like that, then the employees might not be satisfied. But keeping the employees engaged is where going one step ahead and keeping them committed to the work, and also taking accountability, and also providing them a safe environment. That's what keeping the employees engaged is about. So when we say that when will people feel more collaborative and all that, is when they have an environment which they feel safe. So there was a research that said that they conducted a study and figured out that a lot of people were more engaged in environments where they had a smooth relationship with the co-workers, when the environment was able to was allowing them to voice out and give their opinion. That's when the employees feel more engaged. And that is what psychological safety is. So psychological safety and employee engagement is interrelated, have an impact. Then moving ahead, innovation and creativity. Basically, there was this particular research that was conducted in about for 245 members from 60 research and development teams. So because where they work in a lot of coming up with new ideas is research and development team, so they conducted it in that team, 60 of such teams, and figured out that, and this was from different technology firms, and they found that psychological safety is one of the factors. The teams that were feeling psychologically safe outperformed the teams that weren't. And also, what happened was in teams that were not psychologically safe environment, they weren't willing to share ideas or knowledge. So because they thought that their ideas might be rejected, there could be a consequence. So they didn't even voice out. This was the reason that it said that psychological safety improves innovation and creativity. And the final thing is it paves way for inclusive culture. As said, when there is an environment which allows everyone to voice out, give their opinion, share their viewpoints without any feeling of apprehensions, then that's an environment that is more of inclusive, allowing everybody to talk, allowing everybody to be a part of it. So that's what inclusive culture is. So psychological safety, in a way, paves way for an inclusive culture. So this is why psychological safety is kind of important in a workplace. Okay, sure. There are.
So we'll just pause to know if there are any questions up till now before we move on to what psychological safety is not. Okay, great. We are good to move ahead.
Okay. So up till now, we were looking at what is psychological safety, why is it important? But there is also a lot of these kind of myths that is around psychological safety. This could be psychological safety. Something like psychological safety is not about being nice. When we say that allow everyone to talk, give opinion, I mean, let everyone give opinion, doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is accepted at every point of time, or not to make them feel bad that we say okay to everything. That's not what psychological safety is about. Psychological safety is kind of in a way opposite to that. Basically, in terms of psychological safety is allowing an environment where people can have contradicting uh, discussions but not making it into a conflict. It's about basically having an environment where there is conflict around ideas, not conflict around people. So psychological safety is not definitely about being nice. Moving ahead, psychological safety is not a personality factor either. So, in maybe some years back or even now, when someone in the workplace is not ready to open up and talk, we might eventually think they are shy or they are introverted. But now that we have a concept called psychological safety coming into picture, it could be because they don't feel safe in the environment to voice up. So, psychologically safe person is not eventually, I mean, not naturally extroverted. It could be introverted or extroverted. Anyone who needs to address their concerns and point out their discussions should be able to do in a psychologically safe environment. So it's not a personality factor. And psychological safety is not just another word for trust. Though there are a lot of similarities between trust and psychological safety, it's not exactly the same. So if I could say that trust is between two people, say I could trust one person in my team and I could not trust one other person in my team. But psychological safety is at a group level. What the entire team feels about being a part of that particular team. Is that a safe environment? Do they feel okay to talk about things? Or what does the entire organization feel about being part of the organization? I could trust one particular organization, not trust other. But does that mean that the environment is very safe for me to talk anything? So that's it's not exactly trust. And psychological safety doesn't also mean lowering performance standards. So when we say that allow everyone, be inclusive, be a part of, make everyone part of the team, doesn't mean lowering the performance standards of the team. No, it is not that. Psychological safety in a way sets stage for a collaborative environment where everyone can learn from each other, everyone can have their own discussions. So it's not about lowering the performance standards and saying that okay, this is the bar that everyone can perform in this way, not that. So it's not about lowering the performance standards. It's like I said earlier, psychological safety enhances the performance of the team because everyone can share. Different viewpoints are coming into picture. There are a lot of discussions, so the decision making is much better and the commitment is much better. That way the performance is enhanced. So that's about what psychological safety is not, or in a way what exactly is psychological safety. Okay, so now let's also understand what is the connect or of fear in this discussion. So to say that where there is fear, we say that eventually psychological safety is kind of low in that environment because in say in earlier times or very old times when the jobs were very strict or in very in a structured way that it has only one way of doing it and the goal is only one, those kind of jobs might be fear would have worked, saying that okay, if I don't do it the same way, then I might have to face some consequences. So let me just do the structural repetitive tasks, which is just going on and on and on. Those kind of situations, fear might have worked. But As I said, today the world is very evolving, and the nature of the job keeps changing, and the scenarios and situations that we go through every day keeps changing. So in those um, structure, the fear might not be very healthy. Also, fear inhibits learning and cooperation. So here I would like to quote an example that is from psychology. One of the behavioral psychologists, Ivan Pavlov, who was very famous for his studies with the dogs. In the year 1924, all these dogs were caught in a flood, and they had to be rescued in a very. They were in a very bad state when they were rescued. So after that, he observed that their learning got inhibited, and then they couldn't learn post that. So this is one of the examples that shows that our learning doesn't work much better when we are in fear. Also, this is also because in our brain, the centers that is essential for learning gets during fear. What happens is all these centers is used as resources to control the emotional effects and the physiological effects of fear, so that at that time we cannot concentrate in the learning, so it get used up there. That's why fear inhibits learning and cooperation. Moving ahead, feeling safe in terms of like psychologically safe shapes or enhances the engagement in learning behavior. It's like basically when you are in a safe environment, you're able to think better, come up with more better ideas, have good discussions, give counterpoints, and then come up with a much better solution than when we can do otherwise. That's why having a safe environment makes us work better. And in terms of hierarchy and psychological safety, it's I would say it's not it doesn't go hand in hand. Basically what happens is if there is a very hierarchical situation in terms of when there is no way that a person who is lower in the hierarchy can go have a discussion with the person higher in the hierarchy, that creates kind of a fear that say that okay, it's if my boss or manager is saying anything, I would just agree, even though I know that there could be a better way of doing it or more efficient way of doing it. I won't just open up just because they are my boss. If that is kind of a situation, then people might just not voice out, even in situations that could be harmful for themselves, the team, or the organization. So that's not very good for any of us. So that is what the effect between hierarchy, fear, and psychological safety. And like I said, any kind of discussion, innovation, or new ideas come up only when people know that they won't be ridiculed for it, or there won't be any consequences that they have to face just because they gave a new idea. That's when people just voice out. If there is fear of them knowing that, okay, if I voice out in this particular situation, I'm going to face a consequence immediately, or what comes next would not be very fruitful for me. So let me just be quiet instead of talking is not a very good environment to for any of us, for the teams or for even for the organization. So that's why we say fear is not an effective motivator at all. It's the feeling that people get that okay, I'm safe here, this is my place that I can voice out and I won't be harmed. That's what makes that's what a motivator for people to work. So I would just like to pause here and then check if there is any questions. Okay. Yes, Nisha, I could see you said you have a question. Please go ahead, ask your question.
You can, Nisha, you can type it in the chat box. We'll pause for some time for your question. Okay. So, so I think you're typing the question. So we'll move. Okay. Okay. So as you said, hierarchy create issue, but if not hierarchy, that also creates issue. Right. So I'll answer that question for you, Nisha. So when we are saying hierarchy and fear of comparing lower psychological safety, we're essentially saying that it's okay to have a structured organization, it's okay to have a reporting line, but how does my manager treats me? Does my manager gives me enough space to voice out my opinion, and share? So if my manager has made a mistake, does my manager feel free to admit or his or her mistake or goof up, and also gives me the space that I can also go ahead and do the same. I can point out his mistakes, he can point out my mistakes, and then we have a safe environment. So it is still hierarchical, but within hierarchy, if there is fear, then it lowers the psychological safety. You can still have hierarchy, you can have a reporting line, you can have a structure in the organization, but with fear, it lowers psychological safety. And a little later, I'm going to talk about certain research studies that was done by Amy Edmondson around this factor of fear, and certain situations were quoted, and I think that will help bring more clarity around this point. I hope that answered your question for this time. Great. Thank you. Let's move ahead then, Sneha.
Okay, so moving ahead, we have a question for you. So I would request you all to respond in the chat box. So this is the question. How do you think psychological safety can be measured? What are the different ways that we can measure psychological safety?
Personal interviews, okay. Regular interactions. Great. I see a lot of points there in the chat box. I think that's the beauty of having so many participants in the group, because then you get to, collate so many ideas. So I'll encourage all of you to keep adding your points there while we just quickly share. So Amy Edmondson, the author of the book, The Fearless Organizations, she and her team, so they conducted multiple surveys. She actually coined the term psychological safety, and then they conducted multiple surveys, researches, and based on that they've come up with three popular measures. So of course, all that you're mentioning in the chat box, a couple of them are also mentioned here on the slides, and rest are all factors and aspects through which you can measure. Three popular ones are surveys, hypothetical scenarios, and observing silence. So let me start with the last one, observing silence, because I think a lot of you have put observation there, and Amy, she calls it dangerous silence. So what happens in situations is, for instance, you are talking to a colleague or your direct reportee or a peer, someone, and then he or she does not respond to a question, or in a group situation you see a couple of people are quiet, probably in a training program a couple of people are quiet, in meetings some people are like these active people who are always responding to all the questions that the facilitator asks, and is also active in all the activities, but then there are a couple of people who are shying away, they're quiet. In all of these situations, silence does not always mean that he or she does not have the knowledge or the ability to do something, or does not have the knowledge of whatever has been asked. It could simply be that I do not feel safe to voice out my opinion, and that's what the dangerous silence is about, and that's what we need to observe. So when you're saying observation, it's a good tool, but what do we need to observe? We need to observe this silence and why this silence is occurring. So as I said, that several researches were conducted, and they came up with a construct called the implicit theories of voice. Okay, so what they did is exactly this, that they created multiple vignettes or episodes in situations. Okay, for instance, that you have to go and communicate certain errors to your boss. That was one of the episode. The other episode that they created was you have to communicate the error to your boss in the presence of his boss. So your boss's boss is also present in the room. And like that, there were multiple such episodes that were created. What they actually wanted to basically identify is that what are the instances when people speak up and what are the instances when people don't speak up. Okay, and these episodes really help them to identify those factors. So for instance, they found that an employee was okay to speak up and go and communicate the error to his boss, but the same employee did not go ahead and communicate the error to the boss when his boss was present. So the mere presence of the boss's boss in the room just made this employee hold back his entire intention of trying to communicate the error to to the manager. And that's the fear factor that actually Sneha was also talking about, right? The hierarchy, that in the presence of boss's boss, I am feeling that fear that what I may have done with my manager, but in front of his manager, I'm still not able to do it. And that's when we are saying that hierarchy with fear can lower the levels of psychological safety in the workplace. So like that, they identified multiple scenarios, and the result was that people often hold back in certain situations where they could have communicated something that may have resulted and had an impact on the organization, the customer, or also on self. So if there is I'm not feeling comfortable with something, I still do not voice it because the other person could be senior to me, or the other person may not be actually listening to me. And listening is something that goes hand in hand with observation, right? So you are, you're observing and you're also listening. I will be silent when you do not give me the scope to speak, right? And therefore, active listening is so important in today's day and time. And there needs to be a culture, as Amy says, of listening in the organization. And with listening and observing, you can together use it to measure psychological safety. I just see one more chat right there at the end that says, just watch how meetings happen. I think that's a perfect example. Anything, in fact, any group conversations, meetings, trainings, debrief by the manager, anything, just look at those group conversations and see how people are reacting and responding to it. That's a good tool and measure. The other two are essentially surveys and hypothetical scenarios. Surveys, Amy and her team, they conducted a questionnaire of 7 statements. Now, despite psychological safety being a very sometimes it can become vague when you're trying to create a psychometric assessment tool or a survey tool. So despite all of that, they created a survey tool, and we actually have it here in the next slide. This is also available, freely available on online. So it has 7 questions, but it is a highly reliable tool. It's a robust tool. So all the psychometric properties that you essentially need to keep in mind about reliability, validity, all of this for this tool, they found it to be really high. And so this particular survey tool can be used both at the individual level and at the team level. So at an individual level, I would take a self assessment, and I would see how I'm responding to each of the questions, and then what is my score. At the end of the day, the score will tell me whether psychological safety is low or high, and how am I perceiving it. At the team level, it's more like a voting and a frequency. So for instance, let's take the first statement. If I make a mistake in this team, it is held against me. Now, for instance, all say I think we are about 56 people here. So if all 56 people take this survey and say all of us are from the same organization, it will tell us that say 40 people out of 56 said that they voted to the first statements. If I make a mistake in this team, it is held against me. So like that, they found these 7 statements to be the core of psychological safety, and you have these frequency scores against each of the statement that really tells you what the larger population is actually thinking about when it comes to psychological safety. It will also tell you what really you need to start doing. So look at, out of these 7, where your scores are highest, where is it that maximum people have voted, and take that and try to create a ritual around it, or try to create a solution around it that would help to reduce the fear factor that people are working with currently. And this tool is also available in multiple languages apart from English. They have created this and translated this in German, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and I think Korean as well. I guess there are certain platforms which is also available online, where you can, not sure if this is free or paid, the platforms, but you can actually take the survey, and it'll also give you a report. So this is essentially a very reliable tool, because it is created by the person who's coined psychological safety. So it's another good measure. Going back to the previous slide, talking about the last point there, which is the hypothetical scenarios. So this is a bit qualitative way of measuring psychological safety, just the way you would do behavioral interviews. So I did see personal interviews and behavioral interviews as part of the chat box and the messages that we got in the chat. So hypothetical scenarios is where you give a situation to the other person. It could be in an interview setup, it could be in a group setup. These situations are essentially not where there is a black and white response, right? It's not yes or no, and then there is no right or wrong. There is a gray area, and that's where you need to think of those situations where there is a gray area, and then communicate that situation to the other person, and see how the other person responds to that situation. What would they typically do in that situation? Now, what also matters is the interviewer. Now, if the interviewer is someone that the person feels safe with and thinks that whatever I tell to this person will be confidential, I will open up, right? And I will also, truly express what I would actually do in that situation. But if I don't feel safe with the person I am with and who is taking my interview, and and I know that this is not going to be confidential, that's where it becomes a problem. And that is what the last point that I think Moitri has, I think Maitri, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but you're talking about anonymous reviews. Anonymous reviews could be a very important factor here, a tool here to measure, because I don't have to really reveal my name, and therefore I feel more safe to to express and communicate my viewpoint, rather than giving my name and then saying this is what I say. We have actually done a couple of anonymous feedback surveys with multiple organizations, not really around psychological safety, but but taking feedback, for instance, for the leadership team. And we do realize that when we roll out an anonymous survey, people open up much more, they give more points, and they also express certain situations and points that they may not have if we would have asked them to give their names. So anonymous reviews is also a very good way of measuring psychological safety. So those were the 3 points. Let's move on to the third question for this afternoon. So what are some of the ways of increasing psychological safety? We have understood what is psychological safety, what is not psychological safety, and also how do we measure it. But how do you think we can increase psychological safety? And I also see, Rohini, you have a question. Please go ahead. Okay, so Rohini, your question is, a lot of this is based on perception, how I perceive what's going on, especially in a team scenario. I think so. If I've understood that question correctly, I think there is a hunch that because it's perception, we may go wrong, and therefore it is also very subjective. And that's where I think tools like the survey I just mentioned can really, help to, so if you take hypothetical scenarios and you also take the survey, it really helps. You could also probably use hypothetical scenarios with a proper structured scoring system, which and have multiple raters and multiple people observing the same thing. So because there are multiple people, the biasness and that perception aspect can get reduced, because we tend to challenge each other ideas and opinions and then come up with a solution. So I think if it's only the perception part of it and individual perception, try getting other people and ask around if they also think the same way as you are thinking, and see if everyone's on the same page. Okay, I hope Rohini that helped to. Yes, yes. So there are many raters than just yourself. Yeah, great. So I hope that answered your question. Moving on to this question's responses I see in the chat box. So I see feedback meetings, being receptive to feedback, team building activities, active listening, open and learning mindset, employee engagement, dialogue. Yes. Okay, we have some time. Maybe we can wait for some more points in the chat box. Yeah, very important. I think, Kashmira, that's a pertinent point that you have raised, that we have to make people aware of this concept. Not many people are aware of it. Probably they are aware of it, but they don't know it's called psychological safety. And making them aware and changing their mindset and mindset of the leaders, because it's top down. We would need to work with the leadership team. We would need to work at the culture level of the organization, and then percolate it down to the rest of the employees. Thank you so much for that point. Okay, you see, Maitri also has the same point. We're all thinking alike, which is good. Leaders do not accept challenges. Yes, by not in that, not is in capital letters, not linking this to individual performance agreements. Yes, let's not make this a performance part of it. Let's use this to enhance performance. Right. So I think mindset, awareness, feedback, and all of these things are coming out to be the important points that most of you are mentioning. Let's see what Amy has to say about it. And so she said, let's take 3 simple steps. Okay, 3 very simple things that people can do. And there are other couple of points as well that she's mentioned, which is of course quite intuitive, but let's start with these first 3. So the first one she said is, frame the work as a learning problem, not an execution problem. This is actually related to that point which Meekins you've mentioned there, by not linking this to individual performance agreements. Now, if you're having a performance conversation, try to have a conversation around development, rather than creating a sense of fear that, okay, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. Okay, so you better do this. Instead of doing that, provide a sense of environment, a sense of security to the person, that this is an environment of trial and error. Now, when managers are delegating, they delegate essentially for 2 things: one, to develop, the other to get things done. Now, of course, to develop is a trial and error kind of a thing, because I do try multiple things and I get feedback around it. Things go well, things don't go well, and then I try to improve. But when I get things done, when I want to get things done, I still can't use my my lathi to stand with the person to say that you have to get things done by this time, and if you don't do this, then these are the consequences. You can't do that. So even in the getting things done kind of a delegation, try to create an environment where they have a developmental part. Have a development conversation even when you're delegating it to get things done. Say how that particular task even if it has a strict deadline, will help to develop them. And what is the scope of error? Like, they can make errors, of course, but try to keep a cap at it, probably try to keep multiple reviews, and leave that space for the person to make errors and learn from those errors, rather than making it quite strict. So make it a learning problem and not really an execution problem whenever you are framing the work and the performance aspect. Acknowledge your own fallibility. So this is very important, and as I said, it has to be top down. So leaders and managers also need to admit their goof ups and admit their mistakes, and not just expect their their employees to do it and their team members to do it, and not really doing it themselves, because we actually learn from others. So that's about acknowledging. And then the third one is about model curiosity and ask lots of questions. So instead of doing a blame game, saying, you didn't do this, okay, and essentially just pointing out the mistakes, try and understand and develop that curiosity of why that person didn't do certain things, why something was not communicated when it was supposed to be. Probably someone has not spoken up in a group. How many of us actually go to that person and we're like, hey, you were quite quiet, is there something going about, or is everything okay with you? So none of us, or most of us, we don't really walk up to the person and actually understand what is happening. We simply sit at our place and we judge, oh, this person may not have that knowledge, or he is not comfortable, and he's not really the performer type of a person. So we can't really make those kind of judgments without really asking a lot of questions. And therefore she says, create a model where there is curiosity to understand not just where the other person is coming from, but also why certain things are happening in a particular way. And that will also help to challenge your assumptions. And a lot of those measurement techniques that we were talking about a while back can also be supported with these questions, to say that we're getting data from multiple sources: a survey, a hypothetical situation, silence, observing silence, and then also by asking questions, there is something about psychological safety that we need to do about. So those are the 3 simple steps that Amy has mentioned. Let's move on to some other points of other ways of creating a psychologically safe environment. I think it's very similar to a couple of points that you've mentioned as well in the chat box, but we'll just reiterate. So the first one is about healthy conflict, creating an environment of healthy conflict. This is essentially about, she has this one line which is really interesting in this, the book, which says, disagree without being disagreeable. And therefore, you can have conflict around ideas. You can disagree with each other's ideas, but ensure that you're creating an environment where people are okay to have a healthy debate, and and are not really being looked down upon when they are trying to put a point across which is in contradiction to what others are trying to say. So there could be 1 or 2 people who are not going by what the majority is saying, and that's also typically the kind of people we need, because then otherwise everyone thinks alike. So disagree without being disagreeable, and create an environment where it is okay to engage in a healthy debate. The next one is, of course, being inclusive. Leaders need to be aware that differences exist, and it is okay to be different. It is okay to have a different viewpoint. It is okay to not go by the majority, and therefore make everyone inclusive. Now, as Sneha was mentioning, in being inclusive, it's not about being nice. So you don't have to always be nice and be inclusive just to be nice with the other person. You can be assertive when needed, and you can be inclusive when needed. You need to just create a balance between the two. The third one is about yes, Rachna, as you mentioned, it's about agreeing to disagree. The first point about healthy conflict. Yeah. The third one is about be securely vulnerable, and the emphasis is here on the word securely, or being secure. So leaders, managers need to be and they need to start this initiative before and others can actually observe and move on, is to first feel secure themselves about being about recognizing their mistakes, their goof ups, and being able to share it. Now you can't really also put the leader and manager on gunpoint to say that, oh, we need to create a psychologically safe culture and therefore you need to start owning up. The leaders need to feel secure about being vulnerable in front of their employees, and managers also need to feel secure to be vulnerable in front of their direct reportees. And only when they feel secure to admit their mistakes and goof ups, then they can actually expect others to observe them and to basically mirror the same behavior. Speak human to human, I think that's self-explanatory. All of us need to understand that we have some universal needs of being respected, being acknowledged for our competence, not being looked down upon, being acknowledged for our social status, for that matter, and also giving some kind of autonomy to speak up, independence to do certain things on our own, where we can show our competence, and that is the kind of universal needs we need to cater to. Replace blame with curiosity. I think I just mentioned it in the previous slide, where you need to create a model of curiosity. Give employees a voice, which means that you do not have to have rules and an infrastructure or any kind of limitation that restricts communication in the organization. So things like do not use WhatsApp for communication, or do not use a certain medium for communication, or do not put across your point over emails, and things like that. We have our own ways of putting some restrictions in communication, and that sometimes can hinder someone's comfort to come across and put across someone's viewpoint, because I may not be comfortable to walk up to you and talk to you, but I am comfortable to still communicate the same to you over email. Probably after that I can have a conversation over coffee with you, but then the first conversation I want to break the ice over email only. So that kind of environment to create, where there is no restriction in communication, where every employee gets a voice, is very important. And that Amy says that we need to give employees a voice to create a psychologically safe environment. And the last one is break the golden rule, and as we say, adopt the effectiveness rule. So what is the golden rule? The golden rule is that you treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay, but we say that break the golden rule, adopt the effectiveness rule, and the effectiveness rule is about treat others the way they want to be treated, and therefore have conversations with your team members, with your peers about if you are creating any ritual, instead of you creating the ritual, ask them what rituals they want to create. Instead of you setting the goals for them, ask them, are you comfortable with this goal, or what kind of goal do you want to set, or what kind of measure of success you want to set for yourself, what kind of style of communication you want to have, what kind of environment do you need. So think and ask, going back to the same point again, that asking a lot of questions, ask the employees what they want, and then creating an environment for them that is suitable and of their choice, and that is the effectiveness rule. So those are some of the points that Amy mentioned. Just to sum up what we've been discussing in terms of how to increase psychological safety, let's quickly look at 3 points. So one is that you create a non-threatening environment where there is no fear of negative consequences, no fear of hierarchy, where we feel safe to to be ourselves. And then you create a socially motivating environment where there is enough social interaction. And when I say social interaction, it's also about people walking up to each other and asking what's going wrong, and what can change, and creating a culture of acceptance, of inclusivity, and that bonding. And that's where I think bonding and trust comes into the factor, where you're creating a socially motivating environment for people, and volitional goals, where you co-create your goals. Instead of you setting the goals, ask them. And of course, that's where you need to also be assertive as a manager to say that, okay, this is what you want, but we can't do all of it. Let's retain what you said, but the slight change is this. Okay. And then after the goal is set, then you also, support them to achieve that goal and see how they can be developed and engaged throughout the journey when they are achieving it. So that's about increasing psychological safety. I'll pause to know if there are any questions. I do see a lot of points there. Yeah, that's a very important point, Rachna. Thank you for that. Talk to people and not at people, leaders and managers. And that's also the human to human connect, as we say, is important to create a psychologically safe environment. Okay, we'll pause to see if there are any questions. Sneha and I will be happy to answer, because that brings us to the end of this webinar. Do have a couple of announcements to make though. But before we do that, let's look at some questions. Okay, no questions, so we'll take that as a no. So of course, we do a couple of training programs. Okay, so I do see Rohini's. You've taken the first step towards this direction. You've moved to a rating-less performance appraisal approach. Fantastic. I think that's a good step to take. I think we'll also encourage, if others have, taken any small step towards psychological safety. If you want to put your viewpoints in the chat box, if you want to share what you've done, please feel free to do so, because I think others will get some insights on what are those small things that we can do to increase psychological safety. Okay, all right. So so we will, so we do conduct psychological safety programs. We've conducted this at the leadership level, at the employee level. We do a lot of this with cohesive team programs, and so that's that. And then a couple of announcements, because this is the first webinar for us in the year 2020. And those of you who've been following Strengthscape, you know that we do make a couple of announcements towards the end. So those are our upcoming certifications till Feb. If any of you are interested, I know this is not related to psychological safety, but good forum to just quickly announce. And you will be getting updates as well from us over email. So any one of you who are interested in getting certified in all of these certifications that you see here, please feel free to contact us. Any questions, any insights you need from us on psychological safety, what work we've done, and any help that you need, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email ID and phone number is right there. Thank you so much, everyone, for your for your participation. And Sneha and I completely enjoyed conducting this webinar and also learning from you with all the viewpoints that you gave. I'm looking forward to many more conversations. Wish you all a very, very good day and a week ahead. Thank you so much.